Welcome back to Tanya in 5. The last few days we have been studying chapter 22. We are still on our journey to understand how every mitzvah is an attachment to God and every sin is a detachment from God. In the beginning of his journey, in chapter 20 and 21, we established that there are really two perspectives to all of reality. There is God's perspective, which is that God invests a tiny, insignificant, finite amount of energy to create all of existence, and that entire existence never leaves his self. It's all submerged and nullified within him. And thus, from that perspective and from that truth, God is the only reality that exists. But then there is the perspective of creation. There is our perspective. And from our perspective, we do feel independent from God. Now, in order for God to create that perspective of our feeling independent, God must conceal his truth. Now in chapter 22, the Alter Rebbe zooms into this process of how God conceals his truth to allow for reality that sees itself as independent. Now the first thing to know is that there are endless degrees of this concealment. There are some worlds that see themselves as distinct beings from God, yet they are completely subservient to God's desire. They are distinct realities, but they serve as agents of God's desire. This might be termed an angel. An angel is a distinct reality. There's an angel of kindness, an angel of judgment, but these angels do not have free choice to choose something other than what God has so made them to be. So they are distinct and yet nullified and surrendered to God's will. And so there are endless degrees of how much exposure some reality has to God's truth, or how concealed is God's truth from them. The greater the concealment, the more they feel themselves as independent, distinguished beings. Until we get to our world, which is the most concealed of them all. Our world is a world where everything feels completely detached, independent from God's truth. We are born, and our natural instinct is to feel the self as independent, as free, as detached from all other consideration. Then there is a reality that's even lower. Within our world, there is such a level of concealment of God's truth to the point that you can even have idol worship. There can be an existence which not only sees itself as independent from God, but actually declares itself a God. So the meaning of idol worship then is a level of godliness that is so concealed that it is giving life to a being that sees itself as a God in and of itself. Which means then that the divine spark invested in creating that reality known as idol is so concealed that it is what we would call an exile. For there's divine energy invested in some reality that denies the existence of the God who makes it. That's the essence of idol worship. Now, why did God put himself through all this? Why would God conceal himself, create layers and layers of degrees in which entities feel slowly and progressively more independent from him to the point that you have a reality called idol worship that exists and declares itself a God? Why would he put himself into that? Why would he give life to all of this? Because this is the way God can create free choice. If the only choice we have is godliness, if that was the only reality we experienced, there would be no free choice. And if there's no free choice, there's no relationship. And this is what God wants. He wants a relationship. And a relationship is predicated on two parties freely choosing to engage with each other. And that's why we have this world in which there is the possibility to choose something which is not God. Because when we choose God, it is now a true relationship. The takeaway from all of this is, remember, the fact that you have the possibility to choose negative behavior and bad and non-godly activity is not a mistake. That capacity for choice is what makes your good choices all the more valuable, unlike angels who cannot choose to do anything other than serve God. Looking forward to seeing you when we conclude chapter 23.